Welcome to Newslaundry Chhota Hafta. For the full episode, subscribe because it is behind the paywall and only subscribers get access to uncut, complete content. Newslaundry Hafta is our weekly wrap of all that made the news, all that didn't, and all that should have and all that shouldn't have. We agree, we disagree, we critique, and occasionally we beat each other up. But it's all good fun. Subscribe.
This is a Newslaundry podcast and you're listening to NL Hafta.
अंग्रेज अपना लगान और न्यूज़ लॉन्ड्री अपना हफ्ता कभी नहीं छोड़ते. Welcome to another episode of Hafta in a fairly news-packed week. And today we are actually recording Hafta on Wednesday. Usually we record on Thursday or Friday. We're recording on Wednesday because Friday is holy and we would like all our colleagues to get holy off so they're not in office editing Hafta. So it's the 16th of March, Wednesday, 12 noon. And joining us on the Hafta panel today in office from our new studio, which is looking all fancy, and I hope it sounds better as well.
It does.
It does. Is Raman Kirpal. Hi, Raman sir.
Hi.
Joining us on the phone line from Chennai, I'm guessing, is Jayashree. Hi, Jayashree.
Hi, yes, Chennai.
Also on the phone line is Manisha Pande, who is after a hectic month and a half of travel, is hopefully going to take a week off starting one of these days.
Yes.
And also joining us on the phone line is Suhasini Haidar. Hi, Suhasini.
Hi, nice to be back on Newslaundry Hafta.
Yes, nice to have you. We've been getting lots of mails that please get her to discuss Ukraine, which has been ignored for the last 3 haftas because there's been so much election-related news. Most of you will know who Suhasini is. Those of you who don't, she's a national editor and diplomatic affairs editor of The Hindu. She's been the foreign affairs editor and the primetime anchor for India's English channel CNN IBN. It was called CNN IBN back then. Now it's called Network 18. So no, it's called, what's it called? It's called Network 18.
IBN 18.
IBN 18, correct. She presented her show Worldview with Suhasini Haidar. Do you miss TV Suhasini at all?
I did 20 years. That's quite a lot. But, everything is fun. And I do a little bit of video on The Hindu with a weekly video cast called Worldview.
Right.
Which I'd like to always plug on Hafta because I think so many of your listeners are also people who would possibly be interested in Worldview as well.
Yes, many are. So do check out Suhasini's show Worldview. And Raman sir and my audio quality will be far superior to the 3 others because we are in our...
The voice has really changed.
All correct. Yeah. Everything is absorbent surfaces. So, but before we get into the discussions and Suhasini tells us about so much that is happening on the foreign affairs front, we'll get the headlines from Jayashree.
Yeah, so here are the headlines for the week. The Karnataka High Court has dismissed a plea against the hijab ban, saying that it is not an essential religious practice. However, one of the petitioners, who's a Muslim student, has already approached the High Court or the Supreme Court to appeal against the High Court's judgment. The RSS has released its annual report for 2022, which talks of a particular community's long-term conspiracy, this is in quotes, to enter the government machinery. Among other things, it also warned about communal hysteria, misinformation, and the need to create an effective discourse on Hindutva. So, yeah. There's been an uproar over Vivek Agnihotry's film, The Kashmir Files. The Prime Minister has said there is reluctance over presenting history in the right perspective, which apparently this movie does. 4 channels that we are aware of have already run the movie as primetime debates. 6 states have made it tax-free. I think some states have also given leave to government employees so they can go and watch the film.
Assam has said that you can take half day off and you just have to produce the ticket the next day.
And Madhya Pradesh.
Madhya Pradesh for its cops, I think, has said they may go. Very good. Anyway, the Chief Justice...
I don't remember last time which other movie got so much of state promotion.
Yeah.
Not even Modi's movie.
Is that the Vivek Oberoi one?
Yeah.
Oh, God. The Chief Justice of the Delhi High Court, D.N. Patel, is set to retire on Friday. However, he's already been announced to take charge as the chairperson of the Telecom Dispute Settlement and Appellate Tribunal on Monday. So this has ignited this entire debate on appointments, especially considering he hasn't retired yet. India has said it accidentally fired a missile into Pakistan last week. It's blamed the incident on a technical malfunction during routine maintenance. I found this entire thing very shocking. So, the Congress chief Sonia Gandhi has asked all party chiefs of the 5 states that recently went to polls to resign. The Congress's G23 leaders, meanwhile, will meet at Kapil Sibal's residence today to discuss the situation in the aftermath of the party's embarrassing loss. I think there's also been a lot of other issues, like senior leader Veerappa Moiri has said that Sonia Gandhi should take full control of the party. The Aam Aadmi Party's Chief Minister candidate Bhagwant Mann is all set to be sworn in as the state's Chief Minister. I think the swearing in is happening as we record this.
Not only is the swearing in happening, it is being carried live by all channels. And somehow the party knew it because today in the front page ad in Indian Express and the third page ad in the Times of India, it says watch live on all channels at 11:30.
It was front page ad in Madras also, across all the newspapers.
No, even the radio was
How
announcing.
crazy. Why are they advertising in Madras?
It was in the
No,
Hindu,
but
the
forget
video
why
I
they're
read.
advertising. The fact that they knew all channels are going to carry this live tells you something about how news is funded in this country. Just saying.
A US journalist working in Ukraine has been shot dead in the town of Irpin outside Kiev. This was Brent Renaud, who is also a filmmaker. He was working in the region for Time magazine. I think earlier today, 2 Fox journalists were also killed in Ukraine. According to an investigation by the Reporters Collective, Facebook charged the BJP less for Indian election ads when compared to other political parties. Russia has banned US President Joe Biden from entering its territory in retaliation to sanctions imposed by the US. Meanwhile, the UN has said that 636 civilians have died in the war so far, but has cautioned that the number could be much higher. And despite the US sanctions, New Delhi is apparently considering buying oil from Moscow, which is being offered at discounted prices.
Well, I really, Suhasini can tell us, but I find it unlikely anyone's going to do that here. But then?
Also in Russia-Ukraine news, an editor interrupted a Russian TV news broadcast. There was a live broadcast and she appeared with posters reading "No war, stop the war." She was then taken to a police station. I think she's been fined about something amount like £200. The prime ministers of the Czech Republic, Poland, and Slovenia are traveling to Kiev by train. These are the first foreign leaders to visit the Ukrainian capital since Russia invaded last month. And that's the headlines.
Right. Thank you so much, Jayashree. And something that happened just as we started recording, Navjot Sidhu has resigned and tweeted out his resignation as the
Very
Punjab.
terse 17-word resignation.
What exactly has he said?
Dramatic.
You have it?
I am giving my resignation. Thank you. Yes. Very, very unlike Sidhu.
Yeah, usually it takes so many words to say something, nothing. But
Yeah, he literally just said, "I hereby resign as president. Sincerely, Sidhu," or whatever.
now, when it comes to keeping our interests intact and just hedging one's bets without going into the morality, which is not the metric on which foreign relations is ever measured, even then you think there is an inherent assumption by India, which could be deeply flawed, that we should kind of hedge because of the historical association India has had with with Russia and the former USSR, and also going forward we would need them because they do supply a significant amount of our tech for arms or missile technology. You can correct me, whatever is the one. But going by the level of sanctions, right from Gucci, to Facebook, to YouTube, to them being kicked off SWIFT, like at every level, the spiraling of Russia into a banana republic could be way more rapid than anyone's assumed. In that case, does it even matter if we are in the good books, if it's a completely destroyed economy?
So that's really a call the Modi government has to take. And why do I say this government in particular? Because there's this understanding that no, this has always been India's position. However, since 2017, we have heard that India's foreign policy is dynamic, that it's changing, that we're getting closer to the West, that we have shared values with democracies. And that's why we need to set up the Quad. We need to work with other people for the international rule of law and order. How do you sum that up with what we're seeing India's position on Russia? I'll explain to you why. You mentioned the defense dependence. Yes, of course, 60 to 70% of our arms still from Russia. Russia is the only country that gives us technology transfers as well. The US, for all their promises, only offer us, as is where is basis kind of defense. The second part of that is that the third part of that is really that Russia and India collaborate on its biggest military export. Today, India talks about the BrahMos missile. Okay, not in the context of last week where a missile just misfired, but in general, India's defense exports and Atmanirbhar policy of the government have depended very much on talking about the BrahMos missile. Our sales to Philippines, for example, and we're offering the same missile to other countries in the region as well, and it cannot be done without Russia's help. Thirdly, there is this point now being made about the economic costs of the Ukraine crisis. So is India going to admit or accept and bow down to Western pressure on sanctions. Because remember, we did it with Iran. We even did it with Venezuela. When the Trump administration pushed the Modi government, they finally caved in. Although they keep saying we don't believe in unilateral sanctions. Now, when US, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Japan, all are part of these sanctions, about 40 countries already part of sanctions against Russia, is India going to be able to push back against that? Or is it going to say, look, I'm just getting a lot of cheaper oil from Russia. In the past, when you've made me give up Iranian oil or Venezuelan oil, it has cost my economy. That's the second question. So the economic question is a huge one. And I think what we need to look at is the larger global picture is if the entire world is not part of these sanctions against Russia, as perhaps we've only seen against South Africa, that kind of a sanctions regime that the whole world took part in. If it's not going to be a whole world approach, if China is going to stay out of it, for example, that's a big one. If African countries have not said anything, if most of the ASEAN countries even are not actually speaking up except for Singapore, then is it simply just going to be that the world will get divided into the dollar transactions and the non-dollar transactions? That's how we've made our transaction with on the S-400, for example, with Russia. We're buying it by using immunized banks and by using the rupee-ruble mechanism. And the third point, and I'll wind up over here, Abhinandan, is really the idea that if one side, which is the Western side, wants us to be part of this coalition of democracies, and yet is just giving the Modi government a hard time on human rights on a month-by-month basis. Whether it is crackdown in Jammu Kashmir, whether it's a crackdown on the media, the NGOs, there's not a month that goes by where some Western country doesn't show up and give India a hard time about the human rights. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that look at it from the Modi government's perspective. In contrast, Mr. Putin does not raise these issues. So going forward, the Modi government really has to decide whether they want to. Unfortunately, this time cannot be like the past. It cannot be like we'll just stay out of this. And, firstly, because India is a member of the UN Security Council, so every vote is suddenly counting, as it hasn't in the past, and will do until December when we demit that post. And secondly, because the world is now making you choose. They're saying either go with Russia or with us. You can see how many visitors are coming to Delhi in the next 2 weeks, and you'll see a diplomatic flurry of European visitors, in particular, the Japanese Prime Minister and others. And all of them are making the point, look, you go ahead with Russian oil at this time, it's going to be a real deal breaker of sorts with us.
But just one question on this, Suhasini, yes, there's sanctions, but I'm wondering how deep and lasting will the impact be? Because even for Europe, there's a huge dependence on natural gas and crude oil when it comes to Russia.
Sure.
And Russia is now threatening that, we're going to cut off supplies. So even Europe can't really survive without that coming in, right? So there are some customary, it seems like there's some cosmetic sanctions and things being said, but in the longer run, isn't the world's dependence on Russia also quite great to just sort of ignore it or say choose between Russia or us?
To that, I will say yes. Germany and Hungary, for example, insist that they still need Russian oil. But now look, they've put a deadline. They're hoping to cut out of Russian oil by the end of this year. What I'm trying to say is this is now looking much more like a point of no return between them. And the sanctions that have been already put so far are so much that we will also have to look at how many ways it'll hit us. Russia is now the world's most sanctioned country, 5,300 sanctions in all.
Yeah, I read
But
about
are we in, is India in position to, take sides?
Also, I think the big question also that comes up is that in case, if we're in trouble with our neighbors, China, for example, it's Russia that will sort of come to our help and not the West.
True.
So why should we?
But we are assuming that why? Because right now
that's an
the
assumption.
US wants to cut down China, right? The US seems China as the most imminent threat. So is that fair to assume that Russia will come to our help and not US? And considering Modi ji had gone and said, "Ab ki baar Trump sarkar," which was a foreign policy disaster. But Suhasini, is that a sensible assumption that our dhal against China is Russia?
Well, everything is being upended in the world. And let's remember the same choices that are being put to India are right now also being put to China. The US is reaching out to China in a way that we haven't seen. in the past. And it was very interesting that last month when External Affairs Minister Jayashree went to Australia for the Quad Ministerial, instead of saying, making it about China, 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 we heard Blinken making it about Russia and then saying, we have higher expectations from China. So suddenly China is not so much the bad dog in the race as much as Russia is. And I think that's what we've really got to watch, is that the situation is dynamic. Everybody is looking out for their national interest yet, but expectations from India are that much higher. I think Ramanji asked, can India afford to take sides? You see, the point is, India could have in the past afforded not to take sides. They, for whatever it was worth, adhered to something called non-alignment. Suddenly, since 2017, as I said, there was this whole new thing. No, this is the real politic. India is going to look at its economic interests as much. It's going to look at other interests as much. So there is this higher expectation from India. Mr. Jayashree went from talking about India as being, a regional leader, if you like, to being a leading power. So if this is aspirations for India, then no, India cannot just say, I have no preferences in the matter, because each thing you say, an abstention, for example, is being read in the West as taking sides with Russia. So I don't think that choice is open. Can I just jump in and say what was the Indian media doing? Only focusing on Indians in Ukraine. When the media went crazy with that story about how Putin stopped his war for 6 hours just for India. And we can get into that story if you want, because the Ministry of External Affairs had things to say about it. My question was that the war is only being stopped for 6 hours for India, which means that Ukrainians can continue to die, but India is just happy that Indians are okay.
And so that was seen as a celebration.
Yeah, and we do this routinely. You will see yourself that now that Indians have come out of Ukraine, the 20,000 Indians were brought out. I mean, they came out of Ukraine and then they were flown back to India. The levels of interest here in the war will now move to things like the sanctions and the economic stuff. The fact is, you're quite right that everybody behaves in a certainly in an interest of its own citizens or people that it thinks are its own people.
Oh, there is a cultural affinity. I mean, sorry, Manisha, come in. I also would just extend that to Palestine, for example. A lot of Muslim friends of mine, there is an outrage if there's 2 deaths there, and there are 8 deaths in RK Puram. So now I'm not judging you for that. There is an affinity, a religious affinity there. There is a cultural affinity there. There is a ethnic affinity somewhere. So I think
there are 2 things. I think with refugees coming in, there are 2 kinds of refugees, right? The economic refugee and the war-torn people coming from war-torn areas. Now the expectation from the West is that and the expectations, because some of these wars are an outcome of your interference, your meddling, and you've constantly sort of been party to it. So when people are affected by it and they come to you, you need not be moved by it, but you need to take responsibility as a nation, because some of those wars are a result of Western interference. And I think the economic refugee bit is, of course, colonization. Because you've colonized these nations for so long. So it's like France, we get it that you don't want refugees or that there's no affinity or whatever, but some of them are coming in because you colonized those nations for too long, and now they're coming to you because they don't have prospects back home. So I think the expectation for me there is more moral responsibility that Western nations need to take, that have played a role in the refugee crisis in the West. So you can't just look away now.
Nobody in the past has ever objected against these hijabs. Our Kendriya Vidyalaya, they have a policy. They don't object against hijabs. I mean, Muslim students, they come with hijab. In Delhi government schools also. I know it for a fact that Lady Irwin School, where the maximum Muslim students from, this Jamia area go. So many of them don't wear it, and some of them wear it. So there's nothing of that sort.
Actually, that's exactly what the petitioner's lawyer had said in court. They said that since Kendriya Vidyalaya itself permits wearing hijab in the classroom, why has this become a matter of a debate among colleges in the state?
So do you think one fell into a kind of a polarizing trap and making this a national issue, which was the BJP or people like Jayashree Surya's intent all along, and had most of the loud liberal opposition against it not been to that extent, it would have died down without it becoming such an issue? Or you think it had to become a national issue? Because like we discussed a few weeks ago also, I mean, I'm aware of schools where in Punjab, which are secular schools and everything. The girls enter the school in hijab, but before their class they take it off. And it's been there in many schools in Punjab. In fact, my aunt was the principal of one such school. And it's never been a controversy. You think it was a BJP manages to make everything a Hindu-Muslim issue and we fall for it? Anyone?
I think, but definitely the schools could have handled it better. Like right when the controversy started at the first place, there could have been mediations and they could have figured this out better rather than just make this into a national issue. But you can't blame liberals for it.
All of you listening in, the Chhota Hafta, do subscribe so you can listen to the entire Hafta. We will see you again next week with the Hafta. Till then, subscribe, pay to keep news free, because when the public pays, the public is served. When advertisers pay, advertisers are served. Thank you. Goodbye.
All the Newslaundry podcasts are available on Stitcher, iTunes, and any other podcast platform.
Please subscribe to Newslaundry. Help us keep news independent. To catch all our podcasts on news, pop culture, current affairs, and sport, visit newslaundry.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. सुन लिया अफ्रीका मुफत खोरों. Not to brag or anything, but Newslaundry Hafta features in the top 50 in the world on SoundCloud in the news and politics category for podcasts. So do subscribe and see what you're missing, because when the public pays, the public is served. When advertisers pay, advertisers are served. Subscribe, help keep news independent and free. All Newslaundry podcasts are available on iTunes and Stitcher and any other podcast platform.